Some of the best instruments I've made have always solved a problem for me. The wire recorder keeps ripping its wires. Here is Wires, a plug-in version of it I made with Audio Thing. Test equipment is too heavy and fragile for the stage. Joe Analog and me made Collide 4. My newest plugin, Skulptur for iOS and macOS, is no exception to that. Hi, I'm Heinbach and it's good to have you back. Here you see me playing with Ensemble Modern of Frank Zappa fame on stage at the Old Opera in Frankfurt. We are playing my piece Übersetzungsverstärker, for which I created a very special setup using 2 tape machines, an antique synthesizer and my modular. Using all this in part over 70-year-old gear was deeply tied to the composition. I couldn't have done it any other way, but it caused a big problem for me. I don't have a car. I travel everywhere by train when I tour. So already what I had was too much to lug around for me. I really needed a fixed filter bank for this to spectrally fade what I was playing onto the tape loops so the acoustic instruments could find a new spot in that sound. Since I had no space left for a physical filter bank, I asked Bram Bos if he had time for another collab. And luckily, within a few weeks, we had a prototype I could go with on stage. Skulptur is our third iOS plugin together. It follows Gauss, our tape-style looper app, and Fluss. Skulptur is a fixed filter bank, meaning it has a set of bandpass, high-pass and low-pass filters to dial in exactly the parts of the frequency spectrum you want to hear. The core idea behind it is something I've been wanting to do for ages, using the Kinetik modulation we first employed in Fluss on a filter bank. This means you can flick or gently push sliders and they'll keep moving if you dial down the friction. Simple, but musically so much fun. This way, you are the modulation, which is especially useful if you're moving between different instruments. This is very free and not synced at all, so for more rhythmic work, we added an LFO mode. This makes Skulptur useful if you don't have hands free, like when you're playing a guitar. Bram came up with the idea of combining the physics with something like the Korg Chaos Pad, and that mode is so fun to play when you have both hands free. I especially like to play it into a big space, or in this case into something like Fluss. All the little movements become huge that way. And playing Skulptur into all kinds of different effects is one of my most favorite things to do. For example, putting it between a signal and a looper, and looping only parts of the spectrum. This creates all kinds of effects without messing up the mix, basically, without becoming overwhelming, as you're only picking certain parts of the spectrum. In general, fixed filter banks are like microscopes to sound. You can pick out tiny signals in a noisy signal, like your mate's race car mini. put in 4 different models so far, all based on real-life instruments. The EMS B12 Filterbank, the Roland SVC350 vocoder, the Surge Resonant Equalizer, and the Rohde & Schwarz PBO. The PBO is not a bandpass filter, but rather a fixed switchable filter, and we adapted it to be a filter bank. All these have different frequency bands and sound drastically different. Although we didn't model each unique unit and the filter in them, no, we took the filters that Bram Bos developed and just applied the frequencies and the overlaps to them. Which of these modes you apply depends entirely on your material and your goal. The Ana mode, that's very good if you get a broad signal with lots of frequencies and you want to do broad strokes adjustments, while the vocoder is perfect for vowel-y stuff. The Res mode is wonderful for all kinds of experimental shaping and sounds very organic and liquid, while 49, based on the PBO, sounds positively radiophonic. It has that old school elektronische Musikstudio vibe. We might add more models in the future, but these are the 4 it ships with now. One of the things I like to do with filter banks is overdrive the input as much as possible, because that adds a huge amount of harmonics and you can then shape and filter the signal nicely. So we added a wonderful saturator on the input of the plugin. We also added a resonance control to the filters, so you can make them sharper and resonate. Especially in res mode in the low end, you're gonna hear some extra oomph on the 29 Hz band. Another favorite of mine is running noise into the filter bank and letting it sing by itself. There's a noise generator there. This way Skulptur becomes a standalone noise synthesizer. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 different modes for Skulptur, and you can alternate between them, and the settings will be kept from one to the other, which is very handy and actually very playable. Fader physics is the first mode. Based on your impetus and the friction settings, the faders will move. You can limit the range of motion by touching here. There are minimum and maximum controls, as well as a random function and a bump modus. These are especially useful if you run the plugin on macOS, where you can't put all your fingers and move all the faders. And by the way, if you plan on doing that on the iPad, disable multi-touch gestures in the settings. The second mode connects the bands together, so you get less sharp filtering effects, but you can easily animate the spectrum or draw in it. Thanks to Jamie Liddell for that suggestion. Attack and decay will adjust the speed of the physics. LFO mode gives you control of a variable shape, LFO, with variable speed and sync modus. This is very useful for rhythmic modulation and phasing effects. As I joked with Bram, he has left some suggestive UI space up top here, so we might add different modes in the future. If you've got a cool idea, let me know in the comments below. Skulptur is out now on iOS, and it also works on macOS. If you buy it on iOS, you'll get the macOS version and vice versa. There are no other systems planned, since Bram works exclusively in audio units. I'm sorry for that. For me, Skulptur was a very important tool to have on stage, and I'm forever thankful to Bram Bos for making this possible. I'm sure you will find musical applications for it that we had never thought of. And this is one of the best things about making instruments. First, my own problems are solved, but then I get to see what other people are doing with the tools that I helped to put into reality. Enjoy the plugin, and if you are on my Patreon, there's music there waiting for you as well as samples from this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye.